You suggest that the owner of startup should move out of the country in order to grow at scale. And I would like to ask from your knowledge of your resources, how would you help endorse them to grow at scale if you want to push this forward to a public of people in Thailand? And I actually own a startup company here too, and I did what you suggest. I moved out of the country to start a business here.
Maybe one
Someone way ahead of the curve.
more online. Excellent. He's getting his steps in.
We have a question from a live audience in Thailand. Do you think much of these solutions will be impeded by the fact that it will be now near impossible to change the constitution?
Yes, I anticipated this kind of questions before. That's why I started the talk. It's not going to be a political one, and there's political constraint, financial constraint, and legal constraint, which I intentionally left out of the presentation because that's another lecture. That's another thing that we talk about. Obviously, you have to follow your heart and take your brain with you, and obviously we're trying to come up with innovative ideas to turn prices into competitiveness. We have to think, without the constraints first and work backwards on how to fix the constraints, whether it's legal, whether it's financial, whether it's political will. Which goes back to the first questions in terms of institutions blocking election results to become election outcome. That's essentially what it is in a sentence, that election victory does not translate to governance. The question becomes independent organizations, but independent of what? Independent of who and who watches the watchdog. Yesterday at Part-Time Politics, we did talk about this a little bit, but what we are trying to do and to make sure that the independent organizations are truly independent and linked to the people. In terms, that's what democracy means, and that's on three things. First thing is on the origin of these independent organizations. Are they appointed or are they linked to the people in any way? Second is on the transparency. Obviously, there was a court order to dissolve political parties on and on, but you're never allowed to criticize the court. So there's no transparency on arguing back or using logic to really talk about whether it's legal, whether it makes sense, whether it's logical or not. And the third one is about accountability. How do you make sure that, such a very big power, 9 people, 5 people commission, whether it's election commission, whether it's anti-corruption commission, whether it's the court, just 7 to 9 people can get rid of election winner, and also the prime minister. The reason was also removed. So it's not just a partisan issue; it's a bipartisan issue. But if you don't take care of the origin, the transparency, and the accountability of their decision, then we can never move beyond the cycle, the vicious cycle that we see. And obviously, winning elections to be in the government and have enough votes to amend the constitution or to amend laws is something that is a stepping stone towards that institutional reform, constitutional justice that we were talking about. In terms of 1963 Sapapat first plan on equality, I read that, and then I was working in the government before coming to the Kennedy School. I think that was maybe the 5th version, the 6th version, and they were still talking about inequality. And then it was when I reached Kennedy School, then I started to learn that inequality comes in various ways. Income equality is one, and that's usually what they talk about, measured by Gini coefficient. But then there's wealth inequality, land inequality, resource inequality, public health inequality, education inequality, access to power inequality. So if you just touch on just one particular popular inequality KPI, which the government talks about a lot, which is the income inequality, and you look at the Gini coefficient, looks okay. It's not that bad. But the devils is in the detail. Just as the first slide that I showed you in terms of deposit, in terms of land ownership, that's when you started to understand, inequality is not income. And when the government talks about Gini coefficient, it's not that bad. But if you look at all these land ownership concentration, wealth concentration, over-centralization in Bangkok public schools, that's when you start to understand that if this plan becomes the 100th plan, the gap is not going to go away. And that's why when we were campaigning, we tackled the reform, the structure, the access to land ownership and things like that, and not just looking at the top quintile and the bottom quintile when it comes to income equality. Last one was about unicorn, moving forward. The thing is, there's two animals that stop unicorn happening in Thailand, startups. The first one is the tiger, the second one is the elephant. The bureaucracy of doing a lot of paper when you are trying to get grants from the government to be a startup, it improved a lot, to be fair. But in order for you to get into digital innovation or Thailand 4.0 grant or the startup grant, it's like a huge amount of pieces of paper that you need to do, and many criteria and many conditions, and also not very regional ambition focus. So that's why I felt like you have to move fast and break things. Yeah, that's what startup is all about. You are disrupting things. It has to be very fast, very flexible in the way you want to do it. That's why you should be anywhere in the world as long as you are linked to Thailand. That's how I'm going to change the innovation policy once I become the prime minister 10 years from now. I mean, otherwise it wouldn't go. And last but not least, the tiger, the large conglomerates, the monopolies. You're in fintech and you want to do a digital wallet, you got to make sure you wait for the banks. I'm not saying that there's any correlation, but if you want to be in fintech, you want to do peer-to-peer lending, you want to do virtual banking and things like that, you got to get the permits, and the permits are somewhat related to the sleeping tigers in the Thai economy. So if we don't fix it to be firm ground, fair game, and then fast growth. When the government talks about it, we want to be fast growth, let's do robotics, let's do genetic engineering, biotech, all these cool things, but they don't tackle about the firm ground, the quality of the education, the access to liquidity, the financial inclusion. They don't talk about fair game, not using law as barrier to entry and things like that. So you got to build it from the bottom up, because it's been proved again and again that trickle-down economics doesn't work. Fortunately, all things must come to an end, but this doesn't quite end. In a moment, right outside, we're going to have a public reception, and people will be here, mingle with you, get your photos and everything, so it's not quite over. But before we exit this beautiful hall, please join me first in thanking our online viewers. Our online viewers from Southeast Asia have been up since 2 a.m. tomorrow morning to tune in. So please join me. And finally, please join me in expressing our deep appreciation to Pundita for so generously sharing his experience and insights with us. The conversation continues right outside those doors.
ดูคลิปจบแล้วอย่าลืมกดไลค์กดแชร์กดติดตามกดกระดิ่งให้ด้วยนะครับ